The driveway checker is really designed to be a vehicle ground clearance compliant tool based on Australian standards and New Zealand standards, and I'm not going to say the number. And our vehicle clearance or vehicle driveway checking tool, as it's called, it's also vehicle clearance. So there's a number of different ways of describing it. It is compliant with this, and we'll talk about this very shortly, particularly when it comes to the vehicles that are being used for the clearance checking. The good thing about this tool is that you can check multiple or existing proposed driveways. And when I say existing or proposed, what I'm saying is that you can just check an existing curb, put a new curb in, assess whether or not there could be a clash if there's a layback being applied there, or if you're doing subdivision and you're going to be putting in a whole series of driveways connected up to lots, and you want to check whether or not you're going to have any clashing going up to the lots. You can use this tool in all these different scenarios without having to apply the layback to the design, which is the crucial part. And the great thing is now, with what happened in V25, I'm kind of going to my last point on the slide here, is that we introduced the option of a custom variation to create your layback for you on your curb template. So kind of neatly bookends, and I'll actually run that in this session, so we can go and assess scenarios without having to go in and check put the layback in the design to check it. This is very much a sort of a hypothetical scenario checker. And the great thing is, as we make design changes, these checks will update automatically and tell us whether or not we're compliant and whether or not we have a clash. Just a quick mention that we have this tool in the VGE, and it's called Vehicle Analysis, and it can just be used on the vertical grading editor, regardless of whether or not you're checking driveways. At the end of this session, as someone's already pointed out, this is recorded, but at the end of this session, I'll make mention there'll be a QR code for a video or a webinar that we did a few years ago, where we basically put a raised crossing between two curb out stands, and then we did a vehicle check over the top. Now, I won't be doing that in this particular webinar, but the tool can be used for that as well. And at the end, there's a link which will take you to a timestamp showing you that exact procedure and how you can use it. So really, the last part of this which is something we haven't been able to do for the best part of 9 years, is a quick application of a layback onto your string. And the great thing is we'll be able to have a go at putting that in today based on whether or not the driveway complies or works. So quick bit of discussion on the vehicle clearance requirements as outlined in that document. So the Australian standards document says a B85 vehicle, for those of you that don't know, is essentially a vehicle which represents 85% of typical passenger vehicles. And for the wily-eyed, maybe slightly more experienced drivers out there, you'll notice that that B85 vehicle is a Ford Falcon. And that was what the B85 was based on in 2004. And that is designed, or that is basically the vehicle that is used to check domestic driveways only. Then we have the B99, which again is outlined as a vehicle that can be used for checks, but not for domestic driveways. And this is typical of light vehicles, or 99% of typical light commercial vehicles, sorry. And again, for those of you that are probably wondering what that vehicle is, that was based on a Ford Transit. Now, these standards have been in place since 2004. Okay, there was discussion, there was some commentary put out in 2023 from Australian standards, looking at a review of vehicle sizes. Now, just so you know, vehicle sizes since 2001 in the UK, the height of vehicles has increased by about 15%, and obviously with that, the length and the width of vehicles has also increased. So they put out a review asking whether or not the overall size of parking bays and whatnot based on vehicle sizes should be looked to be increased. Now, that was a very popular discussion at the time, but unfortunately, including some television networks and whatnot and news networks, I cannot find any commentary on the result of that review. And I have actually asked Australian standards for a result on that review around vehicle sizes and if they're going to be considering increasing the size of typical parking bays and whatnot. And I couldn't get a response from them, and nor can I find anything on their website. So as things stand, these are the standards. Okay. Now, in regards to how the driveway checker works using those two vehicles, it's very simple. Okay, what we're going to be doing is looking to apply a polyline to represent the wheel or edge of the vehicle. I know on that screenshot there, it looks like it's the center of the vehicle, but at the end of the day, there is no wheel down the middle of the vehicle, it's down the edge. And all we require from you to enable the check to happen is a string with a template located along either the curb or the road centre line. So this doesn't have to be a full road. We're doing a full road today. This could be a template with a curb and a little piece of code matching onto the centre line or crown of the road only, or it could just be a curb, okay? What we're then doing is checking against the design, okay, the design surface using the B85 and or B99 vehicle templates. Just a quick caveat there, because I put an asterisk. It seems peculiar, this, but the driveway checking tool does not require a surface from you created in civil site design to enable it to do the check. So what you'll see today is I'm going to have a profile string created. That's the only string in the project with no surface created at all, and this will still work. Okay, so in the background, it looks at the design string and the triangulation of that design string, and that's what it uses for the checking, which is quite smart. It's also a caveat with that, which I'll cover at the end. Lastly, really the main thing here is that the driveway checked long sections can be plotted. This is an example of a typical check. Okay, so you can see what we're doing is we're putting the vehicle check in the display window with a check envelope, which is the red line you can see there. Essentially what's happening is we are taking your design, whatever that may be, up to the edge of your road. This could be the invert, this could be the edge of bitumen, and then we are hypothetically replacing whatever you may have here, which could be nothing, with a layback, a shape of some sort. Then what we're doing is connecting that driveway spot or driveway check into a known point. And this could be the boundary. Typically, this is going to be the boundary of the property, and the target surface, which we will be basically connecting to at that point, will be the natural. In this case, we also have the option of putting in what we call a shape. So if you're proposing to put a footpath in here, you can actually check how that driveway would perform based on there being a new footpath, which is what you can actually see going on in this scenario. And we will do in this webinar. And this all is managed through this one form down the bottom. As part of the check-in process, we have a library. Okay, so we have a standard library of layback shapes, which you can see over here, which users can create. And we also have a standard library of vehicle clearance templates, which at the moment is just two, B85 and B99, which I'll come to in 1 second. The shape editor particularly is one of those things it's good to show before I do the vehicle clearance checking, because I have to go and pick one of these laybacks shortly as part of the process. And if you haven't seen what these laybacks look like in the way that they're created, it's kind of a bit meaningless. So I'm showing you them now so that when I pick one very shortly, you'll understand what they're actually doing. But this is a standard library whereby what we do is we replace your curb shape, not in the model, I should add, in the checker only. So it's a hypothetical scenario. If you were to put a layback at a particular spot, how would that layback look? And our standard library, this just happens to be picking one of the many that's listed in there, suggests a 30mm lip, which is what you can see here, 30mm high, 30mm wide, followed by 570 wide and 50 high. Okay, so 600 layback, making 80 high total. You can create these. Okay, you can also share them. There isn't a share option in this form, but I have deliberately noted at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide where you can access the driveway shapes. So if you want to share them, because they're all stored in your common folder, they're not stored in your data folder. So if I go and create another one or delete one, you are basically removing it from your master directory from your common folder. So you can share them using the driveway shape.txt file. That shares all of them. That doesn't share one at a time. And you can also do the same with the vehicle clearance templates. The vehicle clearance template editor is not something I'm a big fan of in respect of telling people how to use, because as you can see, it looks relatively complicated. Have a look at our help system, a document in there which explains how to basically draw a new vehicle clearance template. I did have someone ask this a few months ago about how they could do one or create one, sorry. It is a coordinate-based system. To draw a new clearance shape. So if you're looking for something a little bit more out of the ordinary, you can create it in here. If you happen to have something that's very, very unique, maybe you're looking at something that's articulated, etc., that's when you're going to be looking at using an alternative product potentially to manage that. Really what we're doing is creating one single shape for really most of the clearance checking that we expect people would be doing. And again, the vehicle clearance shapes are stored in this file here. Make sure, by the way, if you are happy to be sharing these files around, that you've got your software closed down. Okay. As part of the whole scenario of doing the checks here, it would make sense that we can generate something at the other end. Yes, we can do a compliance report, which is just a notepad file, but this is a driveway checking style, which I've created and now begun to implement in our reconstruction training. And there is a zip file located at that URL that you can see there, which is where the QR code will send you. And you can download this zip file, take the file out the zip. Don't put the zip in your common folder thinking that's going to work. It won't. And when you come to plot the long sections, you can see that new style, which looks a little bit cleaner, I'll be honest with you, than the default. In fact, a lot cleaner than the default. And that's an example of how it looks. Okay, so again, I'll bring this up on the last slide when we've finished. So you guys, if you do want to grab a copy, you can do. Last thing before we tuck in, the driveway checker has some conditions. So you need, as a minimum, a base surface. This is like your NS in the project, some kind of existing surface as a bare minimum, okay? And one road or profile string, obviously they're on an alignment with a template, okay? That's all you need to get started off with using this tool. And just some notes, and I was going to call this gotchas, but it's notes, because these are things which users do experience as they use the software, and as I've picked these up and dealt with customers over the years, you kind of get to see how people use it. And it's probably worth me just mentioning these now. These aren't bugs. These are literally just little things that you should be aware of. So first of all, the driveway checker does adopt edits from Model Builder. So as you'll see later on, if I go in and change the curb that I'm using for a driveway check and strip out and cut and slice codes out of that, that will impact my driveway check. Okay? May seem like, well, that's obvious, but actually it isn't always the case. People go and create Model Builder models, and those Model Builder model edits gets passed through into the driveway check. So just be aware of that. You do not need inserted or extra sections added where the driveway locations are. So where you're making the check, you shouldn't be going in and putting where your polyline is an inserted section there. You just don't need to do it. This is probably the main one which catches people out. It uses layers, okay, for the driveway checking. What can happen, and I've done it many times, is you go and take that layer which you're using for the polylines for the driveway check and then go and use it for drafting somewhere else in the project. You run the driveway check and it goes, well, these polylines are nowhere near the road. What are these doing? And it will start telling you you've got polylines in different locations. So you need to be aware of that. And also the polylines that we're going to be creating in literally about a minute are linked to a string name. So if you go and rename that string or delete that string, essentially those polylines don't get renamed. The layer that is used to create them is no longer functional and you have to go ahead and recreate them. So just be aware of that up front before you start to use it. Okay, so and just before I jump in, have you got any questions on here? I'm going to turn the camera off as well. You don't need to see my mug whilst I'm using Civil 3D here with Civil Site Design.
Yeah, there's a couple in here at the moment. At the moment, we're using 2890.1 for our profiles. Are we going to be expanding to include AS 2890.2 vehicles?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you.
No
and
problem.
The other one that we have is when we do the scraping check on a normal VGE, for example, on the road center line, is there a way to output this check like you do when using the driveway checker?
Yeah, really good question. And the answer, unfortunately, is no. But that's a really, really good question as to for the long term for development to be able to have the vehicle check envelopes, presented on our regular long sections. I suppose that's where the question's going, rather than just purely within the driveway checker. So that's a really good point for us to note and take away. I expect, as we go through this webinar, people that have already used the software may have similar questions, and feel free to submit those or sort of development ideas, improvements that we can apply. I am using Civil Site Design on Civil 3D. Apart from that, it makes no difference whatsoever to using what we're doing today. I have pre-created a Civil 3D alignment for the centerline or the crown for some saw cuts in the edge of bitumen, and there's a boundary over here on the left-hand side. Now, if you're using BricsCAD, Civil Site Design Plus, or AutoCAD, you're just going to be creating civil site design alignments. There is a surface as well in the background, a natural surface, which happens to be Civil 3D, but other than that, everything else is going to be the same. I did say I was going to turn my camera off because I can see my hand waving in my peripheral vision. So I'll turn that off for the purposes of what we're going to be doing now. So the driveway checker lives up here. We do not include it in tool space at the moment. It actually kind of works quite nicely from the ribbon because it's very much a workflow. So at the moment, I don't see that there's a huge benefit to putting it in tool space unless we get a ton of you going, please put it in tool space, okay? But at the moment, it lives up here. Let me just quickly review for you what we've got in the project. Apart from the Civil 3D alignments and the surface, there is one single string, a profile string, no surface. Okay, I could have created this as a road string, but I deliberately chose not to show you how this works. If we go to the vertical grading, you can see if I right click here and open up a cross section, let's just find our way down the job a little bit. There we go. I've matched the crown onto the existing surface. I've thrown the saw cuts onto the existing surface and projected the slopes through using the match section slopes variation, push them through onto the LEB and the REB. The difference on the left side is that there is a proposed footpath going in, whereas on the right, there is not. Okay, so we're going to do two different checks, one on the right and one on the left. There is a series of variations to manage all of this as well. Okay, so it's just a very, very straightforward little template. Everything's sort of matched relatively to the natural surface using alignments. And then we've got the exception of using a couple of cheeky little custom variations, which I will mention, which are being applied at the end. But everything else is very much standard fare. So this is a profile string. There is no surface. Okay, if I wanted to create a surface from this, I could do one of two ways. I could have stayed in the VG there, gone to the model tab and extracted a string surface, or I could create one with Model Builder, but it's not required for the driveway check. To start off with, we are going to use the set layer option. We're going to be checking the driveways on the right-hand side here based on the existing footpath that's there and replacing the curb. Okay, we're going to be putting a saw cut and replacing the curb. We want to see really what the impact is of doing that with the layback that we're going to be putting in there against the existing scenario. We're going to click Set Layer. Now, when you click Set Layer, it will prompt you for an alignment, which is basically saying, look, what string would you like to use? And the reason why is because when I click near the string that I'm using, Pennant Parade, it will prompt me to create a layer, nice little sort of a touch point here, back to ARD, for those of you that remember it. It will create a layer called ARD Drive-Pennant Parade. And the reason why is because any polylines that I draw on that layer very shortly will all be assigned the same driveway criteria. We'll talk about new layer and existing when I come to do the left-hand side, because importantly, I might decide to do something completely different on the left using that particular string. And that's where we talk about new layer category. So it's basically building a layer for me. We click OK. This is kind of one of the most unexciting tools because you go through the process of picking and doing things and literally nothing happens other than the fact that I now have a current layer called ARD Drive Pennant Parade, you can see there. Wonderful. I will now start drawing polylines on that layer. Now, importantly, what you're doing is you're drawing the path of the vehicle. So if, like I've seen on many occasions, people aren't too concerned with our vehicles turning into here, what we tend to see is this. So a polyline on that layer and just press enter. And what will happen is it'll immediately say, hey, look, you've drawn a polyline using this layer. How do you want to set your driveways up? Now I'm going to click cancel. Don't have to worry about that form popping up immediately. I can delete that polyline. You can draw a polyline that is supported with arcs. Okay, so if I did want to, I could draw a polyline, click, click, very, very badly drawn. Don't see a vehicle doing that, and draw it there. I could also draw this in multiple spots. The key for this is that you ensure that your vehicle is somewhere on top of your string. Okay, so clearly, if there was a string, if there was a surface here in Model Builder, clearly there would be, sorry, if this string was created in Model Builder, there would be a surface here. There'd be some triangulation. Okay, so what you don't want to do is start your vehicle here and there is no design in this area whatsoever because the software's got nothing to use. Okay, then what you also want to do is make sure the end of your polyline crosses over the point where the end of the check should finish. So in this case, it's that location there. I'm going past it to make sure that I get the end spot. The other great thing with this is that if you draw this polyline in a way where, okay, so that check might want to come over from this side. I actually kind of like the way that I've drawn it, such as this way here. You can just go ahead and copy this multiple times. Okay, it's just a polyline, and there we go. All right, so that's the driveways. All right. So I've decided that anybody driving into this driveway for some reason is going to be doing a very, very hard left-hand turn on every single one. Really, it's up to you how you draw this out. And as I said, that's not the center of the vehicle. This is checking the edge of the vehicle. Sorry, obviously the wheels of the vehicle based on the B80, as we're going to see now, B85. So don't draft on this layer. Big caveat. That form that popped up when we first started, we get it back again by going to the pull down and click create. So it's going to prompt us for the alignment that we are, or string that we're using for the driveways. I'm going to click this one here. And immediately it goes, oh, okay, so any polylines on layer ARD drive, pennant parade, need to have this criteria assigned to them. So this is where we're going to just build in some driveways. We are going to tell it the match code for the start shape. So remember when we looked at the shape, I did not include, or there was no gutter included on the start shape. You can, if you want to, include a gutter on your shape. Okay, you can go in and create your own. In which case I'd be starting from the EB. But because the gutter is pretty much always going to stay the same, what I want to do is replace what is behind this curb, after the invert, with a layback shape instead. So I'll just go and grab one of our sort of defaults. Again, point of discussion in training is that you're always going in here and you've got different people in different departments go, no, we use this layback. We're going to be doing this. I'm just picking one randomly. Okay, so please don't have any issues with the fact I'm picking a 600 wide here. Just is what it is. In fact, what we should do is maybe go with the 680 high, 30 lip. What we want to then do is look at whether or not we want an optional end shape. So when this driveway check, in fact, we'll talk about the end shape, we'll ignore it for the time being. We'll actually talk about it on the other side of the road. Really, at this point, all we're saying is where should this driveway check terminate in respect of surface. So if you've got a model builder surface for some lots, you could pick that. In this case, I have the natural surface. So at the moment, we don't know on plan where this location is, but I do know it's going to be the natural. The part of the form underneath used to be a cause of confusion because even in fact in most recent training, it refers to the left side of the driveway and the right side of the driveway. And if you look at that in relationship to the polyline, it can be slightly confusing because you're thinking, well, left of the drive, right of the drive, what's going on? This bottom part of the form is basically talking about what is happening on the left-hand side of your road or your string, as in over here. And the right side driveway design extents is talking about what's going on here. The reason for this is quite simple. You might have driveway checks going on both sides of the road, both using this driveway design criteria. Okay, I might have drawn polylines on this side and this side at the same time. Hence why you could have 50, 60 of these being checked in one hit. Now, I don't have, at present, driveway checks being applied on the left-hand side, but what we do not permit is you to leave the left side, as in anything over here, blank. So you need to put a number in, and I'll be honest with you, I think this is something we may change in the future, but just put a number in there and I'm going to put 10. Even though it is not being used, there is nothing on the left of pennant parade as part of this driveway checking. There will be later on, but we'll do it separately. On the right side, where do I want the driveway check to terminate? What is the extent of the check? Well, I know it's going to be on the natural surface, but I can use a polyline. So I'm going to go polyline, pick this red polyline that I've got here already drawn up conveniently, and we're pretty much good to go. There's a few other things we need to look at. The first one is which vehicles do we want to check in the driveway or use in the driveway checker? So we go to design settings. This is domestic, B85. Okay, you have the option to see in the driveway checker other surfaces. So if you happen to have a model builder surface, you think, I'd just like to see where that is in relationship to what I'm doing here. You can display it. Okay, I'm just going to run the B85. If you don't pick anything in here, we will tell you haven't picked a vehicle. And then all we're then going to do is just look at what's down here. Once you've set this up and you're pretty happy with how this is looking, you can save it as a style. Okay. You can also then load the style in on other projects, just so you're aware, and these get saved in your common folder or wherever you want to save them. Let's click create driveways. And again, okay, that's actually a good thing that this has popped up. Polyline is outside the alignment. Now, if I click zoom to, and then click on close form, it for some reason thinks that this polyline is outside of the design of Pennant Parade. So I'm just going to just double check by moving it if this is still going to cause me a problem by clicking on create. So clicking create, by the way, if you go and add more polylines, you need to, in fact, it's just a good point actually, come back to the pull down, click create, click on your alignment, click on create driveways, and that seems to have cleared that up. Not quite sure. It could have been, and this is one of the issues with section sampling, there could have been a conflict with a section sample at that location, but that seems to have just resolved that with no issue. But yes, come back, click on create if you add more polylines on that layer for them to all be assigned that driveway criteria. Now, and again, as I was sort of saying just before that message popped up, there's no indication that we've got any problems at the moment or what's happened. So this is where you go to the pull down again and run the compliance check. Now, what it's going to do is based on the vehicles that I put in the check, and obviously there's only one, a B85, it's telling me that at chainage 122, that there is a clash on forward and reverse. So this is the general report. I will just say the driveway checking compliance report will check every single driveway that you have created in your project, even if they're being applied to a different string somewhere else in the job. Okay, so at the moment, everything is being displayed for you, as you'll see when we do the left side as well. But okay, there's a clash. I'm also getting a marker in the drawing. This is not the point where the clash occurs. It is just merely an indicator that that driveway polyline possibly has, well, it does have an issue with clashing. So how do we then review it? Well, we go back to the pull down, and this is where we now look at design. So we're going to click design, and we're going to click on the polyline that's the culprit here. Just so you're aware, just due to the scales and whatnot, sometimes it looks like you get this funny issue with the display here. If you just scroll your mouse in and out, you'll find that the display just corrects itself. So let's just have a quick look at what is happening along this check, because it's quite smart. Now, you might not be able to see them, but you will if you have a play with this yourself. But there are red IPs just located here, and you probably can't see them through the medium of the webinar. Every time this polyline crosses over a design triangle from this string, it will basically pick up the elevation and create an IP. They are entirely locked. I cannot, if I try and edit these, lock them. Sorry, cannot lock them, cannot edit them. They are reading the design for me live. And as you can see, they're tracing over the design surface until they get to, I'm just going to press escape here because I'm in select IP to edit mode, until they get to the invert. The invert is where I told it to remove the curb design that I have and hypothetically replace it with a layback, which is that 30mm high, 30mm wide lip, followed by the 570 80 high, was it 80 high? I can't remember now, layback or back of curb. They are completely locked. Can't do anything with these because that's part of the constraint of the design, two, the driveway check, and then at the other end, the check has then gone and matched onto the polyline at the natural surface, which is what I told it to do. What we then decide is, well, okay, apparently there's a clash there. How do I see this clash? This is where we go to the Analyze tab in the VGE. We then click driveway check. Again, just quick caveat, you can use this on other strings. Okay, we're going to click driveway check. The vehicle check that we have available is only the B85 because that's what we told it to check against. The chainage increments is incredibly important. If you decide to use this on a road, not a very short piece of driveway like this, don't leave the chainage increments at 100mm because it'll absolutely kill your processing on your computer. It will work, but it's going to check every 100mm on a 100-meter road. You are asking it to do a lot of work. So make sure you put that number to something high and then bring it down until it's sort of comfortable for you. Every 100 mil on here is where it will perform a check for me. Okay, I'm more than happy with that. The VC segments is strange. It's to do with vertical curves, and if there are any vertical curves in the design, how it will split those up into chords. I don't see that is something particularly of a particular issue, unless it happens to be slicing through a curve on the road here, how it's going to split it up. The option is then to check forward and reverse. So I'm going to just, for this instance, just go forwards. So it'll produce a vehicle envelope for me in here in a second. Obviously, what I'd then like to do is see that. So I can just say, well, look, if I move my mouse forwards, I'd like to see where that clashing occurs. If I go reverse, I'd like to see where that clashing occurs. Or, and this is most typical, mouse forward and reverse, I can see where the clash is. Just a quick mention for what's underneath. It'd be great to find out at some point who uses clash positions. But if there is a clash, you can basically set the vehicle to whichever clash position there is. Okay, so I want to see if there's a clash point 6, where would the vehicle be? You can also nominate a chainage, which is slightly tricky to do because 0 is along your invert. So you're sort of relying on where your mouse position is to know that. But the options are there. I'm going to go mouse forward and reverse and click OK. Now, you're actually looking at 2 lines at the front and the back because the vehicle is being displayed in forwards and reverse. So obviously the back is shorter than the front, etc., which is why you're seeing 2 vertical lines. If I just left click to position the vehicle, roughly where I can see the blue strikes or at least gets to the surface and left click, I'm then in a position where I can just sort of move the VGE, I can zoom in. Okay. I guess this is one of the issues with using a tool like this, and particularly is for those of you that are doing this by hand, this probably wouldn't come up as a clash. And the reason why is because it's about the pen thickness of clashing, but also because the wheel, and as outlined in the Australian standard, is essentially like a pin. And really, in reality, a wheel is not going to be positioned directly inside the invert. It's more likely to be overrunning. So in this scenario, I would be hesitant to say that there is a clash just due to this very, very small amount that we're actually clashing here visually in this window. We can zoom out, and at this point, okay, so I can see there's a clash, but really what we haven't done is completely finalize what's going on the right-hand side here, because there's the natural surface, there's an existing footpath here, and I'm not really taking into account at the moment. I'm just slicing straight through it. So as we've established, the IPs that are red are locked. Okay, that's tied to the natural surface. I can't touch that. These are all locked. What I can do though, however, is add IPs. Okay, and we go to the Home tab, and the way that we add an IP in this scenario, because this is an existing footpath, is to click this button here. Do not try and use this one because it will try and find a sort of a reference snap or a sample on this view, and it doesn't work. You want to use this one down here and snap as close as you can with your mouse just to the natural surface, and it will find the natural surface for you. So there's the verge, there's the footpath. You can see as we do that, we get a sense of whether or not that vehicle is going to improve. In fact, technically it gets worse, doesn't it? Because we're just making it steeper. If we were wanting to represent the existing surface through this existing driveway, let's just say we weren't doing anything in here and we wanted to have the design, the profile put onto the existing surface at that spot, we can do the same thing. And I'm going to left click there. And again, this is, as you can see, actually probably slightly better than the existing scenario, okay? But that clash is so small, you could probably, I mean, in my mind, I'd probably be saying, look, there's probably not going to be any kind of clashing there with that particular vehicle type, but really it's down to you as the designer to determine what is going to be acceptable and what is not. Obviously, with this, you can look and go, well, do you know what? I might change something about this, and maybe I want to change the layback. The problem is I don't want to change the layback for the entirety of all my driveways. Maybe I just want to do something on this one driveway. And the way that you can do that is by just closing it down, closing the VGE. You can go to the pull down and go edit properties. Now, what edit properties will do is it will let you override the driveway design criteria explicitly for this one single driveway. So in this scenario, yes, I've got some matching into the existing surface that I've done, okay, but maybe I decide that I'm going to be putting in maybe a different layback, okay, and I'm just going to randomly just pick a new layback here just to show you how this works. And we click create driveways, go back to the pull down. I will just run a compliance check. I think it will probably still clash. Yes, it still does. And then come in and go design. Design. Yep. Click the polyline. Just do a quick zoom. And you can already see there's a different layback there being applied. How that would look in practice, we go analyze, driveway check, B85. Doesn't really matter. Both forward and reverse clash. We'll go mouse forward this time to show you the difference. I'm only going to get one envelope, one. You can see it's very, very, very slight. Okay, but that change happens only on that particular driveway. Just before we go on to the other side, where we have the proposed footpath, Selwyn, have we got any? In my peripheral vision, I am seeing the Q&A panel lighting up here and there. But is there anything in there which might be worth addressing now, or maybe at the end?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things in here at the moment. When you're running the analysis in the checker, is there any way to see how much clearance is being achieved?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, I didn't think so. I thought I'd better run that one past you.
Good question.
Another one, is there a way to link the automatic shape profile of the check to actually create the driveway in a model?
Oh, wow. It's a bit flash. No.
I think that's more about variations and scripts, which we've got a script session coming up in a while, haven't we, I think?
We have, yeah. But look, that being said, I will pop a layback in here. So if it does comply, I'll show you how to use the variations to override, or the custom variation to force a layback shape in here. But yeah, other than that, no. The envelope. There's some nice ideas coming through with how we could adapt this later on down the line. But at the moment, yeah, this is how it's currently working. Thanks,
No
Owen.
problem. And we might as well just keep going with a couple of questions we've got here. I assume if you have a battery into your lots, you can just choose the total model rather than NS for the end of the analysis beyond your boundary.
100%. Yeah, whatever surface you want. Yep, it doesn't have to be the NS all the way through here. It will, yeah, you're just giving it a time point, whatever surface you would like. I have seen a question come in about the checker in the cross-section window. And that is a question that has arisen a few times from different users. And that is something that I know that the development team are aware of. Whether or not that's something we can apply, I don't know. But that has been asked and requested about putting the checking in the cross-section window, which I understand could be quite valuable to many people. Just having the ability to go in and just do a quick check without running the driveway checker.
Michael, someone's actually replied to a question that someone else has put in previously. Basically, that there's no footpath in your design. You're just using a natural surface. So therefore, the profile follows the natural. Doesn't pick up a footpath because it doesn't exist.
Sorry, run that by me again. Sorry. So the right side. Go on.
You're working on an existing surface, so there's no designed footpath in there. So that doesn't show
Correct.
in your profile. So that's basically the reply that the guy was after.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. Also, there's a question here. Can the checker be used for a B double? You could, my understanding is that you could create a new template. That's it, clearance template, and you'd be able to create a B double in there.
You could do. Yes. Yeah. If you've got the time and patience, you can absolutely build your own vehicles in the vehicle clearance template. Yep. We'll now just move on to the other side of the road, and really everything is going to be the same, but it's to show you how you can use the same string to then apply different driveway criteria for a different scenario. And in this scenario on the left-hand side, we have a proposed footpath that we're planning to put in. We just want to see the implications of putting in that proposed footpath and obviously replacing the curb, looking at tying into the boundary. So as I sort of mentioned earlier with regards to the design data form, we've put in a design variation, a custom variation, where we've matched the boundary code on this template to the natural surface. The custom variation called match to surface has the option of using a polyline to match to. So normally variation match to surface, you have to pick an alignment. whereas the custom one actually has the option of picking a polyline and then bringing with it the codes that are connected to it. So you end up with this quite sort of awkward looking cross section, but this is the reality of this particular project. If we just open up a cross section here, that we're actually going straight down back towards the boundary here, and then yes, hypothetically we're putting a footpath in, which is obviously going to create some kind of issue with drainage potentially, but that's at the moment, that's just what it is that we're being presented with, and that's what we want to check. And obviously what we also want to check is if we were to then remove this part of our curb and put a layback in, how would it perform? So let's go ahead and do this side, and to do this side we go back to set layer. Okay, there's no point drawing polylines on that layer because they're using criteria I've set up for this side. So I want to go to set layer, click the alignment, and this is where you go new. So what it's going to do is if you put in here, left side footpath, this will actually create a layer called ARD drive-pennant parade left side with footpath, meaning that, again, any polylines that are on this layer have this unique driveway criteria assigned to them. So you can see there's pennant parade, left side with footpath. And just so we can distinguish, I'm going to put it in a different color. So what I'll do is I'll draw just a series of polylines. And again, look, I can draw these however I want. Just for speed, I'm going to draw this like this, and as soon as I press enter or space, it goes, oh, you want to create some driveways. I'm going to click cancel here. I just want to do them all at the same time. In fact, I want to show you guys what happens if I just draw this outside. Well, there we go, did it again, outside the design, because this end of this polyline won't be in the design, and it will warn me of that. I am going to run this vehicle. Obviously, vehicles don't all enter from this side. I do appreciate that. So what you could do is draw another set of polylines on the same layer with an approach from the opposite side coming in, okay, if you wanted to. In fact, you could end up with potentially multiple polylines, particularly if you're on a very steep approach that indicate, the different size of the vehicle. But yeah, I'm just drawing one polyline at the moment, but I appreciate, not all vehicles enter driveways from the left. So in this scenario, I'm going to create, click the alignment. Now, what you have to bear in mind is that there's two layer, for some reason there's three, but there's two layer scenarios here. This is the one I want to use. And as soon as I click on that, you'll see it's blank. I haven't used it before. So I want to match in at the invert code, the start optional shape. I'm just going to go and pick the same one I did earlier. The end shape is going to be a footpath. Now, these templates, by the way, you can apply a footpath template at the start. You can create, to be honest with you, the fact that it's called footpath, it's just a name, it's a label. You can create whatever shape you want with the shape maker, all right? But when it gets applied at the end, it will get applied in reverse. Okay, so whilst on the face of it, that would be 1.5 meters, then 0.5. When it gets put at the end here, as you'll see, it will be 0.5, then 1.5 meters. Target surface is the natural. And then on the left, because I'm on the left of Allingham, I'm going to use a Allingham. Wow, that's our training data set. Pennant parade, even. Going to click the polyline that I've generated here. Then on the right side, I'm just going to put a number just because it won't let me leave that blank. Going to go up to design settings. B85. I could just put in B99 as well here, but you're going to end up with the same result, and click create driveways. That polyline there, when we click zoom to, is this one here. Click close form. That zoom to button is quite helpful. That polyline is outside. So if you've drafted, if you can imagine what it's like, if you've drafted on this layer, you'll get quite a few messages saying, hey, you seem to have a driveway that's outside the design. Go back to create, click your alignment. Yep, that's the right layer, create driveways, and we're good to go. And this scenario, when we come back to compliance check, yes, we've got one clash, okay, and that's at chainage 26. So what I said earlier about the fact that you get multiple clashes being displayed in the one output or one report, and this is how it works, okay? So if you've got driveways on one project, they're all going to be reported in this one. So yes, I can see there apparently is a clash with the vehicle entering. And if we go to the compliance the pull down here, click on design, do a quick zoom. yes, as well. Obviously, the VG is displaying this in this manner, obviously to the right-hand side, even though the driveway is on the left. But we can go to the Analysis tab, Analyze tab, Driveway Check. Yep, we'll leave all these as they are. Mouse forward and reverse, click OK. Yes, we can actually see we are just bottoming out on that layback. So you, in regards to how you resolve this, this is really down to you as the designer. I can't determine here what the constraint is that would necessarily fix this, because there could be issues with drainage, there could be issues with elevation, slopes, etc. But if we make design changes to our string, that curb will move up and down, okay, in elevation and position horizontally. The layback is something we can change. We can also change, which you can see down here, the footpath, which I've put in, which is connected to the natural surface, 0.5 meter at the, what was it, 2%? Can't remember. Followed by, 2%. It's written right in front of me. 2% 0.5 meter, and then 2.5% for that 1.5 meters. Okay, so I've got scope to go in and be able to change that part if that wasn't so much of a constraint. But this was just to give me an idea as to whether or not, by putting in the footpath in this manner, there is an existing scenario here where the footpath may well not be quite that size, and we may reduce the footpath, but it's down to you as the designer to determine what the appropriate course of action is based on that clash. And the good thing is that as I make a design change, all of my designs within this particular string under this layer can be updated instantaneously and checked for a clash instantaneously. I've just seen a question come in about the car tires. Sorry, I have got the Q&A, but I had a feeling there'd be a number of questions coming in about this. But yeah, the car doesn't, the tire does not sit flat on the bottom. And if you look at the Australian standards, it is like a pin. My understanding is, because I never did this by hand, that it essentially is almost like a pin or a needle that is being checked over on transparency paper over the top of the section that you're actually checking. So you could, in theory, as I said, take a pinch of salt with the result of these and look at them and go, well, actually, the tire would probably not be sitting flat. Sorry, pinpoint in the invert, but would be sort of rolling over the top of the invert in a more sort of typical manner. So let's just say hypothetically again that we're happy with this and that we just simply want to replace the curb there, put in the saw cut and put in a layback. We're putting basically curb reconstruction. We could be doing the same on the other side. When it comes to the application of a layback, you can now, in V25 only, you can apply a layback using a single custom variation. And what I'm going to do is head to Pennant Parade in Toolspace, which I've been doing all the way through. I don't really need to talk to Toolspace anymore, but this is so convenient. Design data form. And I've got what we call a script, okay, a custom variation. To get that custom variation applied, all you do is go add variation or double click in the design data form, custom variation. And then we've got one in there called layback crossing. I'm not going to spend time talking to this because I've kind of done it in about 2 other webinars, and there is a great little playlist if you click on this little video button here, which explains, I'd say, what, 85, 90% of all the different variations that you can do in here. They're black, which means they're a little bit different, but have a look at the layback crossing video, okay? All I'm doing in here, because this is a custom variation, I'll close this down. I can actually activate it and deactivate it, which is quite cool. So I've deactivated the variation. I've essentially said, look, I've got a curb on there at the moment. I'd like the back of curb code to be 60 high, 570 mil back. Then I want to create a lip, which is 30 mil wide and 30 mil high. So it's sort of replicating a layback that I've had in my shape library. The transition is this piece here and this piece here. The only caveat with this is that you need to ensure that you have a sample line at your start chainage, okay? Add a sample line where you want it to start, exceed the distance of the layback width, put in a chainage, just make it up if you want, 130 if you need to. Have a look at the video to it for a little bit of a better explanation. 600 taper, followed by the actual width of the crossing, 2.8 meters, and then click on active, add update. Doesn't look great initially. It's because you have to click recalculate because it adds a load of extra sections in for you. Done. Now see that in cross section. I'll go cross section window down the bottom, open up a cross section in roughly that location. And you can actually see what it looked like prior. I'll deactivate the variation. That's the curb. Okay, now I've decided that that curb will work, that layback will work. Add update. Done. Okay. So this really bookends the design process, because we couldn't really do that easily. There was about 6 design variations that would go in. I think, in fact, to be fair, there was more if you had codes behind. Whereas now, with this variation, you can actually respect what goes in behind. So if you want this stuff, these codes to stay where they are and put the layback in there, you can now do that with this particular variation. Okay. I've just seen another question come in. Sorry, I'm going to try and address some of these as we go through, because it's kind of important. Where are the start and end changes? The start and end changes are determined based on your transition length, 600 mil. So it starts at this chainage, goes forward 600 mil, then 2.8 and 0.6. All you need to do is make sure that your end chainage, it basically calculates the end chainage for you based on these numbers. So all you do is make a number up that exceeds and goes past your variation, because it does it for you. So this kind of end chainage is almost irrelevant, but you have to put something in there. So I might put 120, 130. Okay, as long as that number goes past the extent of where your driveway would be, your driveway crossing or layback crossing, that's what you need to do. And that video, as I said, talks to that particular point. So lastly, we'll just have a look at the long section plotting. And again, the long section plotting will produce long sections of absolutely all of your driveway checks at the same time. Just before I do that, it's just a quick mention for make shape. So the footpath template that I applied earlier, you can see there. Notice how it got applied in reverse when you go to the outside of your driveway check. And the layback that we put in earlier, you can see it's 30 high. So it's going from the invert. But as I said, you could add 450 in here. You could add another row, which is 450 down 40 mil, then 30 up, 30 across. So you can add 3 rows, okay, if you want to. It's up to you how you want to apply them. We already looked at the vehicle clearance templates and the joy of being able to work in that particular form, but it is entirely doable. It's just not quite as clean, shall we say, as other parts of the software. Long sections. And then I will address, there's a question about the layback, so we'll come to this. Now, if you have a look at the end of this layback, have a look at the end of this webinar with the QR code, and you'll get a download link which will give you this long section style, okay? You can then use, and now my buttons are looking a bit funny because I'm running a bit of an awkward resolution on my 4K screen. Just because it doesn't present well via Zoom if I use it at my normal resolution. This little button here will load, and you can go in and load a style, and that's the style which you need to unzip from the zip file if you want to use it. If you don't want to and you've got your own, absolutely fine. Okay, but I tend to find that the standard one is a little bit on the messy side. It will introduce some new layers for you, beginning with the word driveway. And again, if you want to change the style, go in and have a play with this, you are more than welcome to. Now, what I've done by default, and we've kind of do this in training, is we're showing 2 different vehicle envelopes, okay, and showing one in reverse and one in forwards, which is pointless because we don't have a B99 vehicle being checked on any of our driveways, and certainly I wouldn't want to see one in reverse and one forwards in the same long section. So all we're going to do is literally show you where things are. So if you do decide you want to have a bit of a play and explore, you can do. So title information, pretty straightforward. Basic settings is all to do with if you've used the cross-section plotting, by the way, and not legacy. I know some people that still need to be dragged kicking and screaming away from legacy cross-section plotting, heretics that you are. But it's a kind of a blend of cross-section plotting and a tiny bit of old long section plotting. It's not quite one or the other, but there's this sort of middle ground. Basic settings where you control things like scales and title blocks. Then there are bands. So you've got the offset band, that one down there, which is chainages. You've got the existing surface and the design VC, which is, the driveway checking over the design profile. Then that is controlled via profiles and chainages. Now, if you want to add driveway clearances, you can go clearances, and in here, I'll just open up one that I've already done. You can just double click. By the way, this comment button, I've just used to break up the different pieces, just use a couple of comments, double click on forwards, and this is what's been added in. So B85, direction is forwards, not quite sure of the layer on that one. Change increments, and then add the text and add the vehicle name. I expect there's going to be a question about showing the vehicle profile, which unfortunately we're not able to do. And then really where you want that piece of text shown, the location, and the piece of text, the suffix that gets added on, which yes, you can see there is forwards. And the same goes with reverse. I might actually get rid of the B99 reverse, delete that entry. The great thing is it is a bit more intuitive, a bit like cross-section plotting, where you can just go and make an adjustment, change how things look, and have a bit of a play. Obviously, you've then got the option to plot to layout once you've done that, which we'll do. Now, as I said, it will generate all the long sections for you for all your driveways on your project. So there's a case for saying at this point you probably wouldn't be looking to generate all your sheets because, all your cross sections, because at the end of the day you might be looking at different driveways for different reasons. But that, and you can see the only way I can distinguish this is because that's on the left. So it's not perfect, but it's certainly an excellent way of just being able to quickly get long sections out of your design checks. And you can see within the process of well under an hour, we've gone from, other than just having a design, we've been able to check quite a large number of driveways in a very short space of time, review the criteria that's applied to them, change the laybacks, also look at the left-hand side, apply an optional outside shape, then introduce a layback into the design, which once you get into the hang of using that particular variation, it's very, very quick. And then we're in a position to sort of focus more on the design aspect of this, knowing that the clash report and the clash checking will just happen for me, rather than be having to generate, as you've probably done with vehicle tracking, you're generating profiles for every single item and then running the clearance checks over all of those individually. Whereas this is just happening for you in the background. Now, before we close off and head to the Q&A, well, I was going to say this is the time for questions. Selwyn, what questions have we got that we're able to address now?
We've still got a few questions. I'll just go. So the first one, if you're making new driveways, can you add in a comment profile to check? Or does it always join start and end conditions with a straight line?
Yeah, good question. It's always just connecting them with a straight line. Okay, so I do appreciate what the question is, whether or not this segment in here, which is the editable part of the design check, can have some kind of design put on here. And unfortunately, even auto profile is not available for you to use. It's not set up for that because there's so many locked parts of the design. So unfortunately, the answer is no.
Okay. Next one, can you model without a layback template? Perhaps a straight grade from invert to property boundary?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one thing I should have mentioned here is that the word optional start shape and optional end shape. So you could actually just get rid of the shape at all. So you could just be going straight down to the gutter or edge of bitumen. Appreciate it's not necessarily going to have a gutter. You could be going from a rural road edge here and just be going straight off up to a driveway. You do not need to have the shape at the start if you don't want it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Another one, in the custom layback script that you showed a little while ago, is it okay if the end changes overlaps with the start of the next layback?
Yeah, good question. I would probably try and avoid it. I actually wrote that script, and it does calculate the changes as it goes through. But the fact is, you are telling it to do something in the chainage range of another variation. The two of those could end up conflicting where one doesn't work for that specified chainage range. I would try and avoid it. I appreciate if you've got quite reasonably large sampling, say, for example, every 10 meters, it's going to find the next available sample line. And if that sample line, the next 10 meters, like 140 here, ends up going into the zone of another driveway, you probably want to try and avoid doing that wherever possible. I think it'd be good practice anyway.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next one, can Driveway Checker use a second known point, such as a garage design level, to generate the compliant ramp design?
Good question. Well, it can't, other than what it's picking up. For example, if your garage was here, okay, and you had a surface level, you'd have to create some kind of surface for your driveway, for your garage. So if you've got a slab level for your garage, you could essentially draw that as a grading string, create a surface, and then that is your target surface, and the front of the polyline is in fact, no, not the front of the polyline, because it could potentially, if I draw a polyline like this and tell it that is the extent of the driveway, it won't know if it's that point or that point. So you need to have a polyline, which is on the threshold of your driveway, a surface, as I said, maybe a grading string. Hopefully that answers the question.
Cheers, Jonathan. Next one, if the driveways are already modeled, is the correct driveway set up different to enable the check using the designed surface?
In fact, no, what I'll do is go to edit properties of this particular one. Everything that goes on through here is kind of completely open-ended. So if you had done some modeling and design in here, the only way that you could manage this is to potentially bring in that surface in here and then snap to it as part of that check. It's probably quite difficult to retrospectively. This is more for checking prior to design, not design then check afterwards, I would say, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, the next one, can you show changes on the driveway street?
No,
I think
no, you
that's
can't.
yeah,
No, it's
I thought that was a no. And I'm not sure about this one. Can you create an existing level at the end?
so if you have no surface for it to tie into, my suggestion is you need a surface for it to tie into. This scenario here, where I've just drawn a polyline, create a grading string, make sure it creates a surface, set the grading string to be whatever the level is that you want it to tie into, and essentially that little grading string surface is what you're going to be using as far as an existing level if you haven't got survey data. Obviously, if you've got survey data, such as I have here, I've got an existing surface, so I'm able to interpolate that for the termination of the check.
Will it cope with crossing driveway strings, a shared layback, for instance?
Yeah,
So I think
crossing
that's some
driveway
laybacks
strings.
next to each other.
I'm not sure of the shared layback, for instance. So will it cope with crossing driveway strings? So I mean, if it's related to this polyline, which is the driveway string, I can create this as many times as I want, and each one of those will get its own independent check. Not sure 100% of the question on that, but sorry, the crux of the question. I'm not sure if I've answered it, but maybe pop in another response to that if you need.
Cheers.
I'm also having a look at this Q&A because it's not often we get quite this number of questions at the end of a session, because most people sort of go and take away. But this is really good discussion. By the way, I will display the last slide in a minute. So what we might do is do that now. For those people that need to drop out, I will display the last slide. Then we'll come back and address it. If you've got a question you want it addressed, or you've seen some questions you would like to know the answer, let me just share the last slide with you folks. And then if you do need to duck out, you can do. Just a quick mention, if you haven't put 25 on your computer yet, V25.1, this does not impact this webinar whatsoever, but we have a series of new webinars. We have a webinar, a series of videos on our YouTube channel, which you can go and have a look at. Yep, webinar feedback and questions is happening right now. Again, if you want the QR code for that download for the long section style, you can download it. You don't have to use it. You can go and click on, sorry, you don't have to click on anything. Get your phone out, take a photo of that QR code. And if you want to have a look at how you can use the vehicle analysis on just your normal everyday VGE on a string, seeing it being applied on a raised crossing, you can have a look at that particular QR code. And that QR code is timestamped. So that'll send you to the exact point in the webinar when that discussion point happens. That is actually generally a good webinar anyway. If you haven't seen it before, have a look at it. It's quite a good one. I will leave this. I'll give this another 5 seconds. By the way, if you do have feedback and you are going to leave, please give us the feedback. Let us know what you think, not just of the webinar, but of the tools and what things you'd like to potentially see go in. Thanks ever so much. Thank you, Selwyn.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.